Is withholding sex in a relationship a form of emotional abuse? Quite a loaded question, isn't it? It's a topic that's been stirring up quite a controversy of late, and rightly so, because it's not just about the act itself, but the emotional implications behind it. It's about power, control, and consent. It's about understanding the thin line between personal rights and emotional manipulation. It's high time we shine a light on this issue, so join us as we delve into this emotionally charged topic. But first, let's understand what emotional abuse is. Emotional abuse, also known as psychological abuse, is a form of mistreatment where harm is inflicted on another person through non-physical behaviors. This form of abuse can be subtle or overt, but it's always damaging, often leaving lasting effects on the victim's mental health. Psychologists define emotional abuse as a pattern of behavior that impairs a person's emotional health or social development. It's often characterized by a person subjecting or exposing another to behavior that may result in psychological trauma, including anxiety, chronic depression, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the legal definition of emotional abuse can vary from place to place, but it generally encompasses acts of continuous criticism, humiliation, and disregard. It's important to note that while some forms of emotional abuse are not illegal per se, they can escalate to forms of abuse that are, such as harassment and stalking. Emotional abuse can take many forms. It may involve manipulation, a form of psychological control where a person is influenced to behave in ways they wouldn't choose on their own. This often involves the abuser making the victim question their own perception of reality, a tactic known as gaslighting. Emotional abuse can also appear as isolation, where the abuser restricts the victim's social interactions to gain more control over them. The victim may be cut off from their friends, family, or any other support system, leaving them feeling alone and helpless. While these descriptions are quite stark, it's important to remember that emotional abuse is not always obvious. It can be insidious, creeping into a relationship slowly, making it hard for the victim to realize what's happening until they're deeply entangled in the abusive dynamics. So why is it crucial to understand emotional abuse? Because recognizing it is the first step towards addressing it. Being aware of the various forms it can take is key to identifying it in our own lives or the lives of those around us, and taking the necessary steps to address it. Now that we understand emotional abuse, let's examine how withholding sex could possibly fall under this category. Relationship experts and psychologists have varying opinions on this matter. Let's dive into these differing viewpoints to get a better understanding of the complexities surrounding this topic. On one side of the spectrum, we have experts like Dr. Linda Sapadine, a psychologist specializing in relationship dynamics. She posits that withholding sex can indeed be a form of emotional abuse if it is used as a tool for manipulation or punishment. She explains that using intimacy, or the lack thereof, to control or inflict emotional pain on a partner crosses the line into abusive territory. Dr. Sapadine further elaborates that this form of abuse can have severe psychological effects on the person on the receiving end, leading to feelings of rejection, low self-esteem, and even depression. It's not the act of saying no to sex that's problematic, but the intent behind the refusal. On the other side, we have professionals like Dr. Laura Berman, a renowned relationship therapist. She argues that every individual has the right to say no to sex. In her view, labeling the act of refusing sex as emotional abuse could potentially undermine a person's autonomy over their own body. It's important to remember, she states, that consent is a fundamental aspect of any sexual relationship, and a person should never feel obligated to engage in sexual activity against their will. Dr. Berman emphasizes that it's not the act of withholding sex that can be abusive, but rather the motives and the context in which it's done. If a person is saying no to sex out of spite, to manipulate, or to punish their partner, that's where the problem lies. These differing viewpoints highlight the complexity of the issue. The line between a person's right to refuse sex and the potential for emotional abuse is not always clear-cut, and depends heavily on the context and intent behind the refusal. As we can see, there's no clear consensus among experts. One of the key factors in this debate is power dynamics. Power dynamics in a relationship aren't always negative. They can be quite natural and even necessary at times. But when it comes to the intimate sphere of a relationship, they can become a bit more complex. If one person consistently withholds sex as a means to exert control or power over their partner, it could potentially be interpreted as a form of emotional abuse. Let's break it down. Every relationship has its own unique power structure, shaped by various elements like financial status, emotional dependency, or even social standing. Now, when one person uses sex as a tool within this power structure, it can create an unhealthy dynamic. For instance, if someone withholds sex to punish their partner or to manipulate them into doing something, it's no longer about the act itself, but about establishing dominance, control, and power. This can result in feelings of rejection, inadequacy, and emotional distress for the person on the receiving end. In such cases, withholding sex isn't just about a lack of physical intimacy, it's about using that lack as a weapon to control and manipulate. However, it's important to remember that not every instance of withholding sex is about power dynamics. Sometimes a person might not be in the mood, they might be dealing with personal issues, or they might have health concerns that affect their willingness or ability to engage in sexual activity. In these cases, it's crucial to communicate openly and honestly about these issues and to respect each other's boundaries. But when withholding sex becomes a pattern, a manipulative tool, a means to control or exert power, then it's time to take a closer look. It's time to question whether this behavior is not just damaging to the relationship, but also abusive in nature. Clearly, power dynamics can greatly influence whether withholding sex is considered emotional abuse. It's a delicate issue, one that requires understanding, communication, and respect. And if these elements are missing, it's time to reevaluate the relationship and seek help if necessary. Another crucial aspect of this debate is consent. Let's dive deeper into this. Consent is the foundation of any sexual activity. It's the clear and enthusiastic agreement between all parties involved. It's not just about saying yes or no, but about understanding and respecting each other's boundaries, feelings, and desires. It's a conversation, a dialogue that acknowledges each person's autonomy and dignity. In any relationship, it's essential to understand that consent is ongoing. It's not a one-time agreement, but a continuous process that needs to be reaffirmed at every stage. Just because someone said yes once, doesn't mean they're forever bound to that yes. They have the right to change their mind at any point for any reason. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Is it abusive to say no to sex? The short answer is absolutely not. Everyone has the right to refuse sex at any time for any reason. This doesn't make them abusive, it makes them human. Saying no doesn't mean they're withholding sex as a form of punishment or manipulation. It simply means they're not in the mood, they're not ready, or they just don't want to. And that's perfectly okay. Refusal should be met with respect, not resentment. If a partner responds negatively to a no, that's a red flag. It's a sign of disrespect, a disregard for boundaries, and a potential indicator of coercive behavior. It's crucial to establish an environment of trust and respect where both parties feel safe and comfortable expressing their needs and boundaries. This helps to foster a healthy sexual relationship where consent is not only asked for, but is also respected. Remember, consent is not just about avoiding harm or legal trouble. It's about fostering a culture of respect, dignity, and equality. It's about recognizing and honoring each other's autonomy and humanity. It's about creating a safe, healthy, and fulfilling sexual experience for everyone involved. So let's reiterate this. It's always okay to say no to sex, and doing so doesn't automatically make someone abusive. Instead, it highlights the importance of respect, boundaries, and above all, consent. Because at the end of the day, consent is always key in any sexual activity. So, is withholding sex in a relationship a form of emotional abuse? This is the question we've been grappling with, and as we've discovered, the answer isn't as straightforward as it might seem. We've learned that emotional abuse is characterized by a pattern of behavior that belittles, isolates, or controls another person. We've heard from experts who have presented varying viewpoints, some arguing that withholding sex can indeed be a tool of manipulation and control, while others caution that labeling it as such could blur the important lines of consent. We've delved into the power dynamics that exist in relationships, where one partner may use sex as a means to assert control, yet we've also touched upon the fact that everyone has the right to refuse sex at any time for any reason. That's the fundamental principle of consent. So, where does this leave us? It's clear that the issue is complex and layered. Withholding sex can potentially be emotionally abusive if it's used as a weapon, a form of punishment, or a means to assert control. However, it's equally important to remember that everyone has the right to say no at any time, and this right should always be respected. It's a complex issue that requires understanding and empathy from both parties. Open communication is the best way